Okay, so today we're going to have a look at the 2012 VCAR exam, which was a transcript of a speech. So, being a speech, we would want to always refer to the readers not as readers, but as an audience. And it's called Reading the Future, a forum on reading and literacy related activities. Okay, so in this one, they were pretty generous. They said at the very beginning in the background information what the audience was: teachers, librarians, and senior school students. So that's most of your introduction work done for you. Okay, so here in the opening she says, "Good morning, fellow book lovers." So straight away she tries to get the audience on side by including them in this same group of people who are passionate about books. So she assumes that they share that common interest, and this is used to make the audience relate and connect with her. Now, she uses a lot of language like enthusiastic, excited, and this is peppered right throughout the whole piece, particularly in the first section, to create a really positive and enthusiastic mood. Also, to show her that she isn't just some naysayer who is anti new technology, that she does want to embrace it. So, having such a positive and uplifting attitude can garner a similar attitude from the audience within the room, so that they don't become skeptical or cynical about the technologies, but rather keep in mind what she has to say about it. And they can also embrace the fact that she's not a naysayer, like I said before. So, by referring to Gutenberg, this historical reference shows that she's quite knowledgeable in this area, and so in that way she'll have credibility with the audience, because not only does she love books, she knows all about the history of books. So we can see that she is considering the future also with the history in mind. Again, I like change relates back to that positivity we talked about before, showing that she's not a naysayer. She does like modern technology, and we can really see through her listing of positives: easier to get, cheaper to own, more convenient to carry, listing of the benefits of ebooks, that she has really considered the opposition in formulating her view. So, although she may have some bias later on where we can see that she prefers actual books instead of ebooks, we don't consider her as being ignorant of these positives and these benefits. So, therefore, the audience will appreciate that she's considered both sides of the argument in formulating her point of view. All right. Again, down here, phrases like many of you, are just the same sort of thing that you'd mention when you mentioned fellow book lovers before. And we see enthusiasm again, and we also consider that she's continuing to list these benefits. Now, notice, so what's to worry about is this short, sharp, concise, small sentence. So, question actually. So this offers the audience chance to pause, chance to think about, so what's to worry about? Now, in that pause, because of this word worry, they might start to, think and reflect, and maybe some doubts and some concerns will start to creep into their mind, or maybe even that inkling of unsurety. So because of that, she can then capitalize on that with her cautionary tone that follows on. So from being that tone of, enthusiasm and excitement, she now starts to become more cautionary. Now, we can definitely see the interest in children and students as she mentions things like child, all alone. So that will obviously appeal to parental values. And we know that works because parents are very concerned about bringing up their children in the best possible way. Therefore, anything that is not good for their children, they will be likely to reject. Over here, the word substitute is interesting because it has the connotations that it's not as good as the original or not as good as the real thing. So those connotations are then automatically associated when we start to think of ebooks and genuine reading. Where are we? Okay, down here we have a simile because we've got as. Similes are marked off with as, like, or than. As empty as an unwholesome, and unwholesome as a packet of potato chips. So this ties in with obviously the commonly held societal beliefs that junk food are not good for children. So by likening the ebooks to junk food, the audience will be more likely to reject them. Over here, we have a bit of humour used. They existed only in a high-speed wireless connection without which they would be as dead as, well, dinosaurs. So even though she's shifting to a slightly cautionary tone in this part of the article, she doesn't want it to be altogether, bleak and dreary and negative. So she lightens up this part of the article with a bit of humour. Now, sharing a laugh with someone can help to reduce the social distance between you and them. So she hopes that by using humour with the audience, they will feel more affiliated with her and therefore her point of view. Now down here we have endless exposure and hours. So this here could be considered to be maybe hyperbole, but either way it sounds like it is much too much. And that can come through repeating hours and hours, and not just exposure, but endless exposure. So the audience is inclined to feel that the use of ebooks are in fact excessive. Again, we and for our kids, that use of inclusive language is making sure that the audience feels like they're all part of the same group with common interests, particularly regarding the well-being of their children. Now, over here might disappear in a puff of smoke themselves. So this is actually a metaphor because it's not actually happening. Also, it ties in with this whole notion of magical. So, where are we? It's a magical way. It allows us to see impossible, unreal things in our imagination. Okay. So, I don't know, I just think she's trying to be sort of like a bit clever there with playing around with this magic and this puff of smoke metaphor, again, to give it sort of a light-hearted tone. But if we look at the correlation of the metaphor, this puff of smoke, we get this idea of this book just disappearing, and we visualize this, and we imagine perhaps what that would be like to see something that we were reading just disappear. So I guess in a way it conjures up a little bit of imagery to really emphasize how ebooks are there one moment and then gone the next. Now, down here there are some appeals to sort of like inconvenience and also the hip pocket. Unless you paid every year, of course the audience don't want to part with their money, so they won't like the idea of paying over and over again. And talking about these things like not being able to sell it and not being able to find a book you ever liked, that could perhaps appeal to sort of inconvenience, and as the audience don't want to suffer inconvenience in their lives, they want an easy life, as we all do, they would object to this notion of these transient ebooks that you can't pass on, that are there one moment and not then in the next. Now, there isn't a great deal of stuff that you can actually analyse in this picture, despite the fact that there is a lot of drawing, it's very detailed. What they're trying to do is they're trying to create a sense of the absurd, because what the shopkeeper is handing over here is not an ebook, it is an actual real book. And at this we can see it's in a traditional bookstore. So when he says that there will be 6 months before the book vanishes, that seems a bit ridiculous, because how can a physical book just disappear? But that sense of the absurd is then meant to be drawn over to the audience, okay, who see this slide and think about, yeah, that does seem a bit strange that and focus on the money here the customer is handing over. They are parting with their money is gone forever, but the book is only around for a short time. So they don't like the fact that they're handing over money for this, and they also focus on the ridiculousness of the fact of having something, buying something, and then it's gone. Okay, so in this next paragraph, things have a lot of apocalyptic end of world connotations. We talk about building huge warehouses, flooding, and a global cyber disaster. Okay, so it's like these people who are building these huge warehouses are, preparing for the end of the world, the end of books as they know it. So this all these apocalyptic connotations will create fear, and she continues that with the use of fear down here. So we're talking apocalyptic connotations, appeal to fear, and because it's quite hyperbolic, the audience are going to be extra alarmed at this disappearance of ebooks. Then we have an appeal to social equality because they're talking about enhancing the gap between rich and poor. Western readers will be positioned to value that sense of equality and fairness in society, so they will oppose this. Over here we have some assonance, not alliteration, because even though the first letter is the same, alliteration is when they're consonants and here they're vowels. Expensive, energy hungry, e-reading devices. So this creates emphasis on this phrase, but it also helps to really pummel that idea into our heads. It's expensive, energy hungry, e-reading devices. So we associate these terms together, and hopefully the way that they've been written is memorable to the audience. Now over here, she uses her own personal anecdote of something that happened, and it's meant to be a story that's quite positive and a nice story. She's Earth ceased to exist, time began to fly. She really, in the language here, wants to give us that same sort of sense of fantasy that we enjoy when we read popular books like Harry Potter. So she uses Harry Potter because it is a very, very popular book, so the chances of her using that instead of a story that the audience don't know of, she hopes again to connect with them. But when we read this, we get a sense of fantasy and adventure, and that makes us think about books like Harry Potter, which give us that sense of fantasy adventure. And because we want that feeling, we want to have that more, we will be more inclined to embrace books and reading in general. She continues this, reference to wizardry and whatever else. But at the end of the day, her story is leaving this book in this phone booth. And we see that as a very nice gesture, and we can't have a cool story like that happening with ebooks. Lending and sharing, of course, appeals to positive social values that the audience will appreciate. I'm starting to sound a bit like a dinosaur myself, aren't I? So this again is a bit of humour to lighten it up. And down the bottom, we have this revolution again, which maybe goes back to that apocalyptic notion of huge world change, and this not entirely swept away links back to the flooding, and of course the wizardry talks about the magic of earlier. So all this imagery that appears throughout her piece, metaphors, imagery, intertextual references, they basically collect a group of ideas in our mind of the magic of book reading, this huge and drastic change that's coming up, and the fact that if we don't do something about it, we may lose these, fabulous books. So by bringing together all her imagery in the end, she creates this big picture and this big message which the audience can take away from her presentation. Okay, keep working at your language analysis, enjoy the videos, and I'll try and get you some email responses as soon as I can.